When you have a series as long-running as Ninjago, I said it again.
I need to walk away for a second.
It's easy for a show to get stale. When you write for the same thing over and over, it's easy to run into just kind of phoning things in and reusing plot points and characters. But not Ninjago. Ninjago would never do that. But because of that, it's good to change things up, reset the status quo. Not only do you have something else to write about, but you can keep a show's engagement by keeping the audience hooked on new concepts. Of course, we had this recently with the soft reboot of Ninjago with Dragons Rising, which I know has its haters, from people who haven't watched the show since season 5 at best, but when you really take a step back and assess the situation, it truly was the correct call if Ninjago was going to keep going on. Of course, people would argue to just cancel the show outright, but I don't think that's fair. There's clearly demand for Ninjago by not only older fans, but also newer fans being drawn into the cult. It's fair to say that Ninjago, in its old state, had run its course. It's hard to deny that. The world of Ninjago didn't feel as expansive because we spent almost a decade in that continuity and universe. The only thing that hadn't really been explored was the 16 realms. Therefore, combining all of them, not only so we can explore these realms and make the world of Ninjago even bigger, and having more to explore with plenty of new characters. But it also raises the stakes, since the merge has negative connotations on the Ninjago universe, as the merged realms could explode any second. I mean, it's pretty much foolproof. Taking a classic plot point from the show and then expanding upon it while also raising the stakes without any of it feeling unnatural is something that a lot of reboots strive for. I'm not going to say Ninjago did all of this perfectly. I mean, they kind of rushed getting into this state, with the ninja losing their powers at the end of Crystallize, and them just getting their powers back immediately and shoving that plot line to a comic book so Dragons Rising didn't have to deal with it. That could have been handled better. But again, as much as those are valid criticisms, I still think this was a great way to reinvent the series. And even if you don't like Dragons Rising, you have to at least appreciate that it didn't fall into a lot of other traps that most reboots face. Like Ninjago. You see, Ninjago has, whether you realized it or not, has been rebooted a lot. Way more times than you may have realized. Like, yeah, sure, we all know the series got rebooted in 2014 with the release of Rebooted. Very subtle. But no, when you really take a step back and think about it, I can actually count 5 separate times that Ninjago has, at least loosely, been rebooted. Now, we of course need to specify that there are a lot of definitions of a reboot. Some consider just about anything a reboot. Some only may consider some things a reboot and other things spin-offs or side projects, not necessarily a full reboot. Some people may consider Dragons Rising more of a side series, but I don't really think that's accurate. I think it's clear when something's a reboot when it both very obviously is trying to push the series forward, but it also looks and feels fairly different. Also, reboots can kind of come in many different shapes and sizes. While some reboots are meant to appeal to old fans as well as expand its reach, other reboots, or reimaginings as a lot of people like to call it, are more so focused on trying to reach a completely new demographic with an existing IP. Shape that IP to appeal to new people with results. Examples like this can relate to things like Ben 10 Omniverse / the new Ben 10 show. While some old fans of the series can watch the new series, it's undeniable that it does feel completely different and will probably drive some old fans away, which, as long as that's not the show's goal, it's relatively fine in most cases. Like how the original Ben 10 series was a more drama-focused show meant to have you relate to that show's universe and characters and making things more grounded, while Ben 10 Omniverse and the reboot, while still having emotional moments for the sake of stakes, is more so meant to be more lighthearted and have more flat characters. That's an example of a reboot that's meant to completely appeal to a new audience and not really the old. However, sticking with the Ben 10 example, Alien Force and Ultimate Alien were to capture new audiences, but were more so focused on growing the show along with its audience, introducing an older Ben 10 that would relate to viewers of the show that grew up with the old series and were getting older, introducing a more mature version of the character while also giving Ben more mature stories and adventures to go through. I'd say Ninjago never really had the former, Kinda, we'll get to that. Ninjago's reboots were generally focused on keeping up with its older audience and staying in its niche and trying their best not to alienate older fans of the franchise and the risk of trying to appeal to newer general fans. Again, except for one that kind of tried to have its cake and eat it too, but regardless, we'll get there when they get there. Of course, we all know the first reboot. Ninjago was originally supposed to go on for 2 seasons, hyping up a final battle between good and evil, and that being the end of the series. It really is kind of wild thinking about that, because when you really take a look at it, it just feels so weird that they hype up this battle in an entire universe full of characters, that this final battle is only for 2 seasons. It just feels really odd, you know? You have a very marketable cast of characters based around different colors, and also the whole marketing of the show being around a chosen one and a final battle of that world. It's just really strange when you take a look at it. And I guess LEGO realized it, as, well, I guess they realized they had something on their hands and rebooted the series. Kinda makes the final battle ultimately pointless, but hey, try not to think about it too hard, I guess. Weirdly enough though, this reboot came with a lot of pains, and it wasn't even because of anything to do with the show as a whole. Season 3 itself just had a ton of development problems, as the season was meant to be just 2 episodes initially, then just became longer and longer until it became 8 somehow. It's kinda weird, because despite a 2-episode season being stretched out to 8, sounds like they just stretched that out, slowing the season down, it kinda had the opposite effect, as Tommy Andreasen said himself that they had more plans for Techno Woo that hit the cutting room floor. What I'm assuming happened was initially Rebooted was supposed to only be 2 episodes and deal with the Overlord, and that would have been the major plot line. Then maybe they came up with the whole idea of Techno Woo along with some other ideas and decided to extend that to 4 episodes. And had a pretty good idea what all they wanted to do with Techno Woo in those 4 episodes, but then they probably came up with the whole ninja in space idea for the last 4 episodes and plans completely changed around, with either Techno Woo not getting too much focus because of all that or needing Sensei Woo back for that storyline. It's very confusing when trying to make assumptions and without just clear-cut telling us what these ideas were and what specifically happened during this developmental pipeline. I haven't watched Rebooted in a while, but a lot of these developmental problems do wind up showing in the final product, even as someone who does like Season 3 a lot for what it does have. But when you really look at it, it feels like a big season with a whole bunch of meat, but somehow ends up feeling hollow with what it tries to do. But regardless of that, I do feel like this reboot was okay in the grand scheme of things, putting us back in the familiar waters, putting eyes back on the series before introducing the new stuff that was better, but might not have piqued your interest if you heard that the show was coming back. Like theoretically, even though I think we can all agree that Tournament of Elements is better than Rebooted, it wouldn't have been as intriguing and appealing as the Overlord coming back. Then, once you're back to being invested in the universe of Ninjago, then they introduce you with all the new concepts. But I also feel Rebooted did sprinkle in enough new stuff to feel like it was pushing the series forward rather than just regressing it for the sake of appealing to nostalgia, with the new look of the ninja suits. It may not sound like much, but I promise even something as small as that is enough. Plus, it also appealed to LEGO set fans as well, because with these new suits, you got versions of these characters with their hair pieces, which was something a lot of people wanted. Remember, back in seasons 1 and 2, the only way you could get the characters outside of some rare instances was in a full ninja mask. So the hair pieces were really hard or just completely impossible to get. So that also helped appeal to older fans who were just interested in the sets as well. And of course, I cannot end this conversation without talking about Zane's death, which as much as it's done to death, ironically, this was something absolutely nobody saw coming and showed the show was going into a bit of a more serious direction, and basically promising that your favorite character could die. Sure, they can be brought back, but seeing your favorite character go through dying was still enough for a stinger. So as much as Rebooted has a lot going for it, both positively and negatively, I think as a reboot, it was done pretty well. It's not perfect, but I'm sure a lot more franchises would kill to have a reboot even half as good as this, even despite its flaws. But despite that, it wouldn't take long for Ninjago to get another reboot. This one was more of a soft reboot, as this was more meant to refresh the show rather than reinventing it, with the show changing the look of its characters and aging up the marketable chosen one Lloyd. And yes, I can already hear the mob, but as we went over in a previous video, these designs were a necessity and gave the characters more expressive looks. The only reason my people hate them is because they are tied in with the movie. If they weren't tied with the LEGO Ninjago movie, I guarantee you these designs designs would not have been as bashed, or at the very least I feel like people would have moved on by now. I just still think the messaging was what was wrong with this change, because the message was that LEGO changed the designs to welcome in the fans of the LEGO Ninjago movie, and while I think that's completely accurate, I do not think it is the only reason. Now, would these designs have changed specifically this season? Maybe, maybe not, we don't know. But I am extremely confident that these designs would have rolled in eventually. It's just such a stupid controversy that I cannot believe is still going on to this very day. Like, I get it, changing designs of classic characters is going to get people upset, but the fact when these designs become 10 years old in 2028, which yes, that's 3 years, good golly gosh, people will still be complaining about it, I swear. Anyway, other than the design changes, this was the season that was supposed to draw in fans of the movie into the show's audience. And while the movie's success didn't warrant that as much as I think LEGO had hoped, man, this was such a great season to introduce them on. Kinda like Rebooted in a lot of ways, honestly, only, a lot better. This season was very much centered around Lloyd and Garmadon, which was a smart move, as that was the movie's plot as well. And while the movie was a more lighthearted take with emotional moments, the plot of the season is very similar to the movie, just under a completely different lens. Like in the movie, you got Garmadon teaching Lloyd how to throw and being overflowed with emotion, making for a very sweet moment. And then you have Garmadon in Sons of Garmadon, who is literally a demon and literally throws Lloyd out of a prison complex.
Lloyd, I'm gonna teach you how to throw.
Such a great ending too. Kinda like season 3, but 5 times better. Yeah, season 3 kinda ends on a cliffhanger, but the ending of this season is just flat out depressing and really gets you hooked and makes you want to see what happens next, getting you invested in the show long term. This is of course not even talking about Lloyd and Harumi's storyline, which like with Zane's death, showed that Ninjago was becoming a lot darker. Like I could just imagine the people that stopped watching Ninjago during season 2, didn't really watch the reboot, saw the movie and decided to give the show a shot, expecting to just see their favorite color-coded ninjas again and get hit with this heartbreak, like, dang! I think this was another decent soft reboot. It not only welcomes old fans back to the franchise, but it gets them hooked and pushes the show forward more than ever before. This is like Rebooted, but like even better. Obviously a season like this probably wouldn't have worked that well for Rebooted given its circumstances, but for Sons of Garmadon's circumstances, it absolutely outdid itself. We're 2 for 2 here. Sure, it would be a shame if they rebooted the show again for some reason with completely different changes that probably killed the show for a lot of people. Ah, dang it! So, LEGO wasn't satisfied with changing just the designs of the characters, but decided to completely change just about everything about the show. But you know what? I won't be a negative Nancy. I'm a good man. I'm charitable. I'm nice. So let's start with the positives. The first major change that I think did positively impact the show was changing animation studios. Now don't get me wrong, I love Will Film's work on the previous seasons, and I still have a very solid nostalgic connection to it. However, WildBrain changed the animation of the show for the better in mostly every way, as the way that WildBrain animated the characters is a lot more loose and the battles feel more passionately choreographed. It honestly feels like whatever budget they have, they always save it for the final few episodes, so the final battle just uses up the rest of the budget. The only drawback I feel is the actual detail and fidelity. Not sure if that's the right word, as while Will Film feels more cinematic in terms of its animation quality, WildBrain feels a bit less so, with flat colors and simplistic design. However, this aspect was actually improved a lot more later on in Dragon's Rising, being made in Unreal Engine 5, which is super weird to say because in my gamer sense, that's a gamer thing, not a cinematic thing. In fact, I didn't even realize this, but season 11 through 15 were still made in Unreal Engine 4. That's really weird. But I still wonder if that means they can make a video game with these same assets. Like, could we get a Ninjago Dragon's Rising video game that looks more or less exactly like the show? Because that would be cool to see. Anyway, stay focused. So yes, while I still obviously miss Will Film a ton, and I still think there are some points where they still beat WildBrain in terms of cinematics, I still think the switch to WildBrain was the correct call in the end, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Though honestly, I do wonder why LEGO made this change in the first place. Did Will film one out, or did WildBrain make an animation pilot that just completely wowed LEGO? This whole thing is just very interesting, and there's a bunch we just really do not know. Fun fact, we actually got to see Will film again a little bit later in 2021 with Ninjago Reimagined Golden Hour, showing what happened with Sensei Wu and the Time Twins. Anyway, even if we didn't have Dragons Rising upgraded visual quality, I'm still of the opinion that WildBrain was a worthwhile change and did make the show better long term. What didn't, however, was the change in direction. So for some reason, after the animation studio changed, episodes of Ninjago went from 22-minute episodes, taking out commercial breaks of course, to being cut in half to 11 minutes, 20 to 30 episodes, depending on the season. I have no idea why this happened, but what I do know is it was a huge mistake. Initially, I don't think they're too bad. In fact, I think Secrets of Forbidden Spinjitzu was the best season to handle the 11-minute format and shows the benefits of it. With 22-minute episodes, it's kinda harder to introduce a Ninjago fan's worst nightmare: filler. As much as people hate filler, filler can lead to great episodes. It's good to chop up the story and add some more slice-of-lifey elements or experiment on things you otherwise couldn't. There's some great episodes in Season 11, and a lot of them are the filler episodes, except for that one.
I like your vehicle. It's actually cooler than mine. I think I'll take it without asking.
Except for it introducing Fuji Dove. That was the only good thing about that episode. But we got some other decent episodes. The News Never Sleeps, reintroducing Little Nelson. Where is he, by the way, in Dragons Rising? And introducing us to Antonio. And not only that, but giving us a slice of life episode to show the ninja's adventures from a civilian angle. It's just a nice episode all around, and it would have been a pace killer if it was a 22-minute episode or was a side plot to one. Snake Catastrophe is another great episode for similar reasons. I know people hate this episode, but come on, it's fun. It's just this 11-minute long comedy sketch of people trying to live their life during a typical day in Ninjago. And not only do I think it's cool for that, but I think just having an episode like this is kinda cool. Also, it helps that it's genuinely funny. My favorite bit is them just doing a suntan commercial while fiery rocks are following from the sky. Like, come on, tell me you didn't at least chuckle at this. But if you really are a buzzkill and hate that episode, we also have the Kaiju Protocol, which is basically a kaiju movie having great action in this Sin City-like aesthetic. And once again, if this episode was in the 22-minute format, this would have been an absolute pace breaker and would have been a drawn-out episode or just laced as a subplot to the main adventure. There's other smaller examples of this too in Prime Empire, like having a whole entire episode where Okino gets a chance to shine going over his backstory, which I could have seen just being a smaller montage-like sequence if it were in the 22-minute format. And also one of the best episodes, Ninjago Confidential, which, as funny as it is, could have gotten annoying or have less focus on it, making it more of a subplot that could have been forgotten about. However, as much as I would love to defend this format for all the good it brought, I cannot say even with these positives that this format was worth it, because even with Ninjago Confidential, it even shows what's wrong with it. Because at the end of the episode, Zane gets captured by the mechanic and Pixel wakes up to him gone, and they immediately and abruptly transition to Pixel trying out the detective voice, which, as cute and funny as it is, it does unintentionally make Pixel look unfazed that Zane was captured, which I know was not the intention, but it comes off that way because the episode was about to wrap up, so they had to end the episode. Which segues as to the major problems with this format. Like I said, I think Secrets of Forbidden Spinjitzu, and I'll even say Prime Empire, handled the format okay. But around Master of the Mountain is when the problems start to show further, because while those two seasons were a bit more relaxed, filler-esque to a degree, smaller seasons coming off the Oni trilogy, Master of the Mountain and onwards feel much more like traditional Ninjago seasons. And because of that, the cracks really start to show just how much this format really hurts these seasons. And of course, leads us into Crystallized. You can make the argument that the 11-minute format worked for Master of the Mountain and Seabound. Admittedly, I can't think of any obscene examples off the top of my head of it ruining one of these episodes, but that's because I can think of way more for Crystallized. As Crystallized, in terms of scale, is a way more traditional season, as it was the biggest season of Ninjago yet, and was literally the end of it. and I feel like all of the problems, well, most of the problems, stem from this format. Episodes in Crystallize feel like they're on fast forward most of the time, because it really is that packed of a season, but it feels like it has no time to properly go through the plot points that it wanted. There are many elements of Crystallize that needed time to shine, like the biggest example I can think of is Oni Lloyd. Because after all the buildup of getting Oni Lloyd for the entire second half of the season, he's on screen for basically less than a minute. And I think it is completely in character that Lloyd broke out of his Oni form the way he did. The problem was that the characteristics of the scene just feel like they all happen at once, with Garmadon getting hurt and fueling Lloyd's anger, to him releasing his Oni form, fighting with it, realizing that he's a monster, and fighting himself out of it, and that causes him to fall off the fortress, which leads him to riding the dragon. All of that happens in the span of less than a minute. This would have been a great sequence if it just had some more time to breathe, if it actually had the time to properly build this up and show Lloyd in his Oni form more. But because this is the final episode, and we gotta have the ninja do their thing, and we still have 2 minutes to have a worthwhile send-off, it all gets rushed into each other, like everything that could have made this scene great is just missing. You can find examples like that all across the 11-minute episodes in Crystallize specifically, and it just really shows that a show like Ninjago with seasons like this simply just do not work. And a lot of people tried to blame the change on the writers, as instead of the Hangman brothers writing for the show, Braggy was the head writer, and a lot of people were like, oh yeah, that explains it, it's his fault, ignoring the fact that Braggy was a head writer for the Oni trilogy, which was considered the peak of Ninjago. But also when asked about it, Braggy actually wound up responding that he preferred the 22 episode format, but didn't have the right to make that decision, which is a huge shame. I kind of feel bad for Braggy in hindsight, because while he did wind up doing incredible work for the series, you can tell that his writing was effectively neutered by this change in direction, and then was removed from the series in Dragon's Rising, being replaced with Doc Wyatt, unfortunately not really given a chance to really show himself in a freeing way. Regardless though, I like Braggy's work for what it was, and we truly don't really have an idea on how much he was responsible for a lot of the decisions made during this era. Like, we really don't know who a lot of the fault lies on why everything turned out the way it did, especially with Crystallize. Because there really is a lot of finger pointing on who wrote the words, "It's okay, she's with us." Whether that was Lego wanting to redeem Harumi for the sake of making the show look more lighthearted, Braggy maybe didn't understand Harumi because maybe he didn't write her much in the first place, or Tommy Andreasen not really understanding Harumi as a character and just wanting everything to get tied up in a bow so everyone could have a happy ending. Or maybe even a lot of those aspects at the same time. We truly have no idea, and honestly, we might never. Like, let's be honest, as much as we really care about this, we're just a vocal minority. People are still upset about changing the ninjas' designs. They don't care about anything after that, so it's possible we may never know who wrote on the dotted line a lot of the decisions that led to seasons 11 through 15 turning out the way they did. I would like to know someday, because this truly was an absolute train wreck. It's so insane just how everything came out in the end that you really want to know everything that led up to what happened. Forget this, forget that. I want to know whose idea it was to write "It's okay, she's with us." And did anybody in the writing room say, maybe this isn't such a good idea? Anyway, this section of the video got a little off track, but it's an interesting situation, because season 11 was an example of a reboot that people expected the worst from, and turned out to be absolutely right. And somehow, just as surprisingly, didn't absolutely kill the show. Thankfully, I think Lego realized their mistake. A little too late when releasing the biggest season of the show, but whatever. But thankfully Lego did fix their mistakes, because here then comes Dragon's Rising, a completely new reinvention of the show's status quo, going back to 22 minutes, giving plot lines a lot more time to breathe, not forcing every season to be a fresh set and actually have continuity between seasons, and completely new characters to get attached to and starting fresh. As I said at the start of the video, minus a few mistakes, I really do feel like Dragon's Rising is one of the best examples of rebooting a series, at least for the moment. Maybe in retrospect in a few years it'll have a crystallized moment and make me change my mind, but dear God, I hope not. But despite those issues, Dragon's Rising is a win for this franchise, and I hope it stays on track. I am curious what the new hot reboot will be. Will Dragons Rising end up reversing the merge at some point and returning things back to the status quo? Or is the merge here to stay and maybe we'll get loads of more spin-offs? Or will the ninja get relegated to the background and Eren and Sora are the completely new poster child for the franchise? We won't know until we get there. But if I learn anything from this video, Ninjago is a constantly changing franchise that constantly tries to reinvent itself and tries to experiment a lot. And while that leads to absolutely horrific things and dumb decisions, I think that's pretty cool. I like that Ninjago doesn't try to play things so safe. As much as I hate the 11-minute era, in a way, I'm kinda glad they tried it out even if it led to Crystallize. And again, Dragons Rising is the best the show has ever been, so all of these reinventions leading to that will always make it worth it. And I'm super excited to see where the franchise goes next. Well, what do you think about Ninjago getting all these reboots? Do you enjoy how much Ninjago likes to experiment, or do you wish it would just stay the same and stay consistent? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Hope you enjoyed this longer video.